Coming to you from a portable microphone, this is Don't Get Me Started. This is a conversation about advertising. And here is your host, freelance creative director and creative circus department head, Dan Balser.
Yes, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Good to be back. Good to be recording. I don't know how long it's been since I've been in this room to record a conversation, but as far as you know, it was 2 weeks ago because that's when you hear these. So welcome back to another episode. Today is David Littlejohn, as you know. Great conversation. I shouldn't say that. I hope this is a great conversation. Great forum we just came out of. There was a palpable buzz in the room from the students. I think they were inspired. I know there were students calling audibles on their questions, changing their questions after they saw the presentation. And I had gotten a heads up about this guest from an alumnus to say that he was disappointed that he wasn't going to be able to be here to listen to the talk, which is pretty cool honor to know that the word gets out that someone's coming to present, and it's going to be exciting. So I was excited to hear you speak, to hear David speak, and I'm excited to get the conversation started. So David Littlejohn is the founder and chief creative director at Humanaut, which is a sort of agency by default. We're going to talk about that in Chattanooga, Tennessee. He started off years ago at a small agency called Maddock Douglas. It started an internship and then ended up being a copywriter there for about a year and a half. He was at Draft FCB, spent almost 2 years at Crispin, Porter, and Bogusky. And I want to talk a little bit about what that did to transform, inform, and educate David as a creative and a professional. Spent the next almost 4 years, I want to say, working for different agencies. Saatchi & Saatchi, LA, BBDO, San Francisco, Kirschenbaum, New York, among others as a freelancer, and founded Humanaut Creative September 2013. So welcome to the Creative Circus. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this.
Great to be here.
It's really great to meet you. And why would Andy Pearson why would he have told, what's the relationship? Why was he so excited? Why do you think, did you know he was going to contact me? And let's talk a little bit about the relationship that you have with him. And it's fascinating for me to hear the impressions of someone sort of seeing the creative circus from the outside and then coming in to experience it versus a lot of people who are coming back to their experience here. And I want to hear a little bit about what the perception of the circus and the alumni are in your relationship with Andy. All right, so we just heard the door open, and I might leave this in here. I don't know what recording do not enter means to someone.
Come on in.
Is that what that means? Come on in?
Yeah, or just try it.
Listeners,
See
if
happens.
that frustrated you, you have no idea how much that pissed me off.
I like that we're starting off with you pissed off.
Oh my God. Maybe that'll focus me. Jesus. I'm taking off my hoodie for this one. So talk a little bit about I'm curious, does the school feel like what you thought it was going to feel like? Talk a little bit about your impressions of it.
And I mentioned this kind of the beginning of my forum. I've had a pretty good awareness of the circus just through people who I've worked with over the years having gone here. I mentioned, not only have I worked with Andy Pearson and Eliza Bayless, but Mike Kolbecker was a partner of mine at Crispin, and we spent about 2 years together working.
So smart.
And so everyone who's ever come through here has just talked like really highly about it, and also just it's clear that it was like a transformative, part of their lives. That it was, and I can kind of see why. It's like you've gone through college, which was maybe like, felt like a bit of a waste of time. You kind of came out like not still knowing what you're going to do or what you were about. And you'd also grown up a lot in those 4 years. And then you come in for 2 years to just be surrounded by people like super aligned with, where your head is at and where you're trying to go.
Yeah, it's like, wow, this exists.
With all these creative people. In some ways, I wish I had it because I didn't get to go or go to a portfolio school. But, I can imagine that it's where you really grow up creatively. And then probably just build such a great network of friends and peers who you form that and continue that relationship with.
Well, it's a cooktop. Isn't Crispin kind of like a wildfire? I mean, aren't you kind of getting cooked in a different way, but sort of the same education in some ways?
Well, and I think that anytime people are brought together and put under a lot of pressure, and I think it just brings them together in this huge way, and you kind of build relationships that are super real that you can't get in your normal 9 to 5 or 9 to 10 or whatever you want to call it. And I think that is one reason that Crispin, a lot of strong relationships have come out of Crispin, because it was such a pressure cooker or a bright burning fire that people would go through, and it just kind of brings you out at your most. You're putting it all out on the line, and then you see everyone else doing the same thing, and so you learn to, I think, really appreciate people, but you've probably also seen people at their lowest.
Right.
And when
it's hazing in some ways.
Right.
I mean, there's science about it, right? I mean, that the military style hazing. I was in a fraternity that, I'm not proud of this. I haven't told this on the podcast, but I was in a big Midwestern college in a fraternity that back in those days, hazing was part of the deal. And the hazing was not physical hitting. It wasn't forced alcohol drinking, but it was
paddling.
It wasn't any of that, but it was sleep deprivation.
Okay.
It was being kicked out, woken up before dawn, getting kicked out of the house because we lived in the fraternity house, getting kicked out with your pledge brothers. And there was some bonding going on to where, to this day, I still think of those guys as my family. I feel like they're like somewhere between brothers and first cousins to me, these guys, all of them. And because we went through that trial by fire. There's a reason that's a figure of speech. Sure. So I wanted to ask you this, and I'm not sticking to any script, as you can tell. If I'm a little all over the place, you can try to rein me in. But from what Andy said and from what I saw you present, I think we're both kind of going to end up running next to the track the whole way. Do you feel at all like Humanaut is now sort of doing Crispin, Porter, and Bogusky on your terms? Do you feel like you've taken the DNA and grown it in a petri dish the way you want to manage it?
I would not mind it if people said that. And I might be happy if people said that. I definitely... So Crispin was the last job I had. That was, I don't know, 7 years ago.
Wow.
So it definitely was the last agency that I was willing to work at. And
why?
Well... Why did I not work at another one since?
Well, you say the last agency you were willing to work at. Are you saying that you weren't willing after that to work at another agency?
I really, after Crispin, looked for my next agency and could not find the place that I wanted to go. And that kind of left me with... I freelanced for a while, but then that kind of left me with the only choice of starting my own thing. If the job that I was really looking for existed, I would have been much easier to go there,
right,
and take that job. I even considered for a little while like changing careers and going into like game design or like interactive design around video games and all that kind of movement that was happening.
Was that a consideration out of frustration, or was that a love that you still hold?
I would say that there was... So what happened for me was there was a time when... So I'm someone who just loves ideas. And I know that maybe sounds just cliche or something, but it's like a new idea that I feel like I have not come across, or a new expression of something, an innovation, just gets me incredibly excited. And so for a long time, I felt like the advertising industry, and Crispin specifically, was coming out with the ideas that would blow my mind the most consistently. And so as an idea person, I looked at Crispin and the work that Alex Bogusky and all those guys were doing, and just being like, that's where I need to be.
Baby carrots, right? There's a mobile game where you crunch to make this guy a shopping cart jump. I mean, this is some weird stuff to try to market carrots as junk food. Yeah, that was Andy's. A 30-minute commercial on DirecTV where you have to stare at a revolving Whopper, and you have to, after 30 minutes you get a coupon for a Whopper. What a terrible assignment! Like, right? How fun was that? Yeah. And I know Brittany Poole, who's been on the podcast, wrote sort of the jokes and the instructions for what you had to do, button inputs, to make sure that you were actually paying attention. These are some seriously cool, creative concepts.
Totally. and incredibly innovative, like pushing the technology to new places.
In both of those examples,
right, where you're like, and when I was starting out in the digital world, I mean, that it was the Wild West back then. You really, I remember talking to MySpace about a campaign that we were doing, and we're asking MySpace to build a secondary page underneath your page where this cool thing could happen. And they were like, yeah, we can't do that. And what I realize now is like we were asking MySpace to make an app.
Oh, that's very interesting.
But they just didn't have, we didn't have that language. We didn't have, and we, as the creative, the industry of creatives, we were out there throwing all these digital tools and these new things against the wall faster than anyone else was, and coming up with all sorts of crazy cool stuff.
Right. I will tell you, you definitely were doing it before anyone else was, because at that point, a lot of agencies were still thinking of digital as, sort of the other business, like sort of direct mail, or sort of it's from another part of the business. It's not really TV. It's not the sexy part. And to see the opportunity in that as the sexy part is really, that's pretty profound.
And it's not just like an innovation of a widget, it's an innovation with a creative component on top of it. And so, I think Crispin was quick to embrace digital and saw that as like the next innovative platform. And so, and the rest of the industry was too. And there was some really cool stuff happening, in the 2000s where people were figuring out how to use these new tools for the very first time. And so for a long time, the advertising industry just really satisfied that itch and that kind of desire to be around and be coming up with those types of ideas. And even when I was just young and starting out, a lot of my, the ideas that got me, advanced my career were not advertising ideas. There was a time too when non-advertising ideas were great advertising ideas. And I think Crispin also was pioneering that at a time. So anyway, long story short, I get to Crispin and I get all the things I'm, have been wanting to do and to work on, and the culture, and it was great. And I got to do some really stuff I'm very proud of, that was still adding value and creating unique experiences and innovating the technology. I mean, we worked with Twitter, I think we were one of the first brands to put a Twitter handle on a TV spot and work with Twitter to they didn't really have an API. Like that wasn't, you didn't hear the words API back then, but we'd had to work with Twitter to figure out how to build Twelt Force, where all of the, Best Buy blue shirts were connected with one, one unified handle to answer, tech advice. Right. So I was getting to do a lot of that stuff, but at the same time, I was starting to see ideas that were getting me more excited outside of our industry, in the startup space, in the app space, just, these developers and these, sometimes just kids making, stuff that suddenly was, changing. And also the internet was changing. Tumblr was happening. There's all this new, really cool, people had access now to making stuff. Right. There was a time when brands were the real innovators because they had the budgets, and things used to be expensive to make stuff. And we quickly went through this transformation where creators now had access to the tools. And then something happened, for me at least, where I started looking and seeing like, the creators over here, whether you're artists or startups or just some kids playing around with a camera or, some code, are making stuff that's blowing my mind. Yeah. And I'm not getting that the way I felt like I used to over here. And I also felt like at the time, I think Crispin was still the agency that most aligned with my values in the work that they were doing.
How would you describe those values?
I think, what Crispin taught me was to think about the work as a piece of culture. Many people and some of the listeners probably have heard the rumors or remember it. There was a time when to submit your ideas at Crispin, you had to write them in press release form. And that really drove a lot of people crazy. And some people would say it's
it's a rote exercise.
It's things like that. But I think the insight behind it was massive.
Genius,
and I think it led to, at the time, it led to, making breakthrough work even more relevant and smarter.
Yeah, for the younger listeners that don't know what that means, basically you would present the work or even start the work by saying what impact, what's the story and culture that this will have made. And you write it as a press release, as a news piece, and then otherwise you can't justify making it.
Yeah, so you couldn't submit a 30-second spot or script, and you couldn't just write a paragraph. You'd literally have to say, Domino's is announcing
a new way to order pizza or something.
Yeah, like it would literally, and if you couldn't sit there and write a good press headline, like you had to stop. You were just like, man, this isn't pressworthy.
Can I say something? I think you're saying the same thing in two different stories. I think there's something that's happening that separates great creatives like yourself, and I'll say you're a great creative. Your agency won Small Agency of the Year last year. You're obviously successful. The work is great. From the people who are going to work and have a job. And that is that you're talking about artists and inventors who have an insight and figure out a way to make it, right? Versus someone who gets a brief and then has to somehow within a box make that brief interesting. And the same thing for the press release. You either think of it and embrace the idea that I want to make something newsworthy, otherwise we're going to stay up. Or you say, fucking press release, that's bullshit. Why can't we just do advertising? And those are two different people, right?
Totally.
And I think that identifying yourself as the first one, you answered my question, which I don't know if the listeners remember the question from 10 minutes ago, which is, did you look into game design as a frustration because there's no agency job, or did you look at it from an original perspective? And you were looking at it, if I can answer for you, correct me if I'm wrong, because that's where innovation was happening, that's where people were taking risks, that's where people were creating.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah. And that's where I wanted to be. I feel like advertising was a very useful place to put all my skills to use, which were a lot. I was, in high school, I was involved in everything and not the best at anything.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome for an advertising guy.
Exactly. Right. It's probably every advertising guy.
No, it's every. I think it's every kind of relevant creative.
Yeah. So it's
I will say this, and for the listeners, you may be, if not one of the least stereotypical looking creatives I've ever seen. So David's sitting here across from me. He has a conservative sort of country club haircut,
very normal,
clean shaven. He's got a dark gray Humanaut t-shirt on and jeans, and you would not believe him if you asked him what he did. Well, once you say copywriter, I'll say, okay, yes, but you'd never be an art director. You appear to be, I don't know, maybe because I'm just prejudiced and biased growing up in the South, where you kind of just look like an average guy. You don't think like an average guy. Once you pry open the mind, you don't. Yeah. There's some toys in there. But I just want to say that because I realized on the podcast a couple episodes back that I don't paint enough of a picture for the listeners sometimes of the voice on the other side. I'll take a snapshot. Balserville.com, which is the homepage for the website, has a picture of us recording. But sometimes people don't hear it. So I just want I'm sorry. Yeah. So I digressed.
The person whose voice you're listening to is just a very normal, boring person.
Very normal, boring looking person.
Yes, exactly.
I don't mean to. I'm no.
It is kind of my secret webbing.
I don't mean to offend.
No, when I work with clients and whatnot, it's nice to be seeming very normal, put together. And
there's no question. I bet you they feel less sold to from someone who looks like you than they do from someone who's got tattoos and long hair.
I'm going to be able to sell a much crazier idea.
I believe that. Do you believe that?
I kind of do. Yeah. I mean, I just think that
I do.
Well, but it's when I say a crazy idea, though, I mean it's not crazy, right? I'm actually telling you what you should do because it makes sense.
No, crazy in that context is defined by the one they didn't expect to see.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's
nothing to do with being crazy for crazy's sake. And let me tell any account people listening to this conversation, we don't want to sell stupid crazy. We want to sell unexpected. Crazy means unexpected.
Yeah, totally.
A client will always gravitate towards the one they imagined, and they will call the outlandish one crazy. But it's not outlandish or crazy. We wouldn't be showing it to you. It's solving the problem our way.
Yeah.
Is that a fair way of saying it?
Totally. Yeah. It's... crazy that works is not crazy.
Right.
And that's why it's awesome when, like, you know, that's why I actually get much more excited to see when our work gets, you know, organic press, and when it gets shares, lots. Like, I look at the share count on our work, and that's how I judge it.
It's awesome.
And then, you know, it's like, it's like I was really proud that we won an Effie. Like, I don't think most creatives care. It's like, that's the job.
Yeah, we should care.
So when something like Save the Bros can win an Effie, that makes me happy.
That's the goal. I think that's the awesome. Almost in game. That's a great. So one of the questions I ask guests, and we may have talked about it inadvertently, what personal trait of yours, what do you think it is about you that has helped you be successful?
That's a good question. I've heard I'm very curious, and I would say I'm very curious. So I genuinely like to learn about things. I genuinely look at kind of what's in front of me and challenge it and poke holes in it and twist it and mess with it just by nature. And I think I guess I get bored very easily too. So it's like, I kind of think a lot of the life out there I see is just boring. And so I'm always like looking and hunting for that kind of thing that sparks in you, that kind of like
stimulates something.
Yeah, where I'm, you know, this sounds cheesy, but it's like, I like the feeling of having my mind blown. And it's just such, like, whether it's you know, listening to a TED talk or you know, seeing a new something come out, or, you know, some of Apple's early innovations, like the stuff where you're just like, oh my gosh, like that's huge. So I love that feeling. And then I guess I just like chase that. Like, I'm just like always looking for it.
That's cool.
Then when I get a client or a brief, I'm just looking at like, okay, well, we can start with the fact that everything surrounding this is what's expected and normal, and the whole industry has been, you know, played out, and how do we turn this thing and shake it and dump it upside down, and then find something that's going to make people see it again.
That's cool. How do you scratch your curiosity itch? How do you indulge in that?
Well, it's, you know, obviously I've been a little busy lately with, you know, running an agency. I've got a 1.5-year-old daughter, another one on the way.
Oh my God.
I just,
bless your heart.
I also just had a house fire. My house burnt up.
The whole thing?
Yeah.
Oh my God. When did that happen?
About a year ago, and we're about to move in this week. Next week, we're going to move back into our house, which we rebuilt. So anyway, so
happened to my neighbor. How did it happen?
It's like a 130-year-old house. It's one of the historic homes in Chattanooga. It's, but it was probably a electrical.
Yeah.
But listeners should know about 40% of fires they never actually figure out what it was, and they kind of, for them to say that it was electrical, you'd have to have an actual little like pop that they can see. So anyway, long story short, it's so
you don't have a whole lot of time.
I wish I had more time to just like really scratch that itch and to really like dig into you know, more obscure films or books, or, you know, but I'm definitely, you know, watching, like, the trade pubs don't do it.
No,
you know,
the reason I'm asking is that, and I have to give a talk to some high school seniors this weekend at a baccalaureate ceremony, and I want to try to instill in young people the curiosity that you have, which is so much harder to get to indulge now that algorithms decide what we see.
Yeah.
So everything that we're seeing now is basically decided by everything we've already seen. Yeah. So I asked the question, and it's a very difficult one to answer. Obviously, if you're busy, it's like it's the same track. Right. You keep going back to the same stuff, you're going to see the same stuff. I just think it's hard.
I mean, one thing that I've started to do, I mean, part of it is I think also just engaging something new very rigorously. Why can't I say that word?
Rigorously?
There you go.
Mm-hmm. With rigor?
Yes, with rigor. But to really, I still like reading books. I like that kind of deep, long time.
How do you choose a book? And I'm just curious. I mean, it's not that important. I'm just wondering how does one choose a book?
Yeah, I think it's like
recommendations.
I'm usually looking. There's probably some themes that come out for I like to read books about innovation, about one of my favorite books in the last 3 years, probably that shaped a lot of some of my recent thinking, is a book called What Technology Wants by Kevin Kelly, and it's basically just about like what is technology, what is it doing, how does it work on a very basic level.
You mean stuff like just a rock to break a shell, simple technology.
Yeah, like going from the rock to break the shell solution to this idea of money, to then this idea of law, to then this idea of organizing data electronically, to like what's
language technology.
Yes, or really this book would say so. Yeah. What I read those books because I think I'm not one of those creatives that like has a vision or a weird idea comes to me and I just kind of like, and I can't tell you the logic of it. Like, if you think about some of those creatives you'd see, or some of those spots, like creatives that would work on Skittles, or like, I think I'd be bad at that stuff.
I do too.
Right.
For myself.
So I think the logic, the framework of the idea, how the idea is constructed, is really important to me. And I feel like I am really constructing when I'm thinking, and I'll have a little thing come in, and I'll it's like I can almost imagine in my mind my hands kind of working on the idea. But so all that is to say is then I like to read books that are about like the theory of ideas, like thoughts about what tensions are at play. For a long time Crispin would, and still probably, but like the idea of finding the tension in the brief, like, is something that you talk a lot. But when you can find people that can talk about ideas, it's really fun. And some people just can't, they don't. Right. But when you get to that point where you're working on an idea together, and you both know the tools you have at your disposal to shape it, and the idea could go this way, and let's build it a little like that
to guide the experience.
Now let's take that same idea and build it a little bit this way. That's interesting. Let's take the same idea, build it a little this way. You kind of need to know, I think it's like you kind of need to know how ideas work. And
I think that's really important what you just said too. And I try to emphasize this and talk about this in my classes, where the idea is base camp, and you're gonna build paths in different directions, because I don't think that young creative students especially can tell the difference between an idea and an execution. They think that saying the idea is the idea.
Right.
And I'm not being disparaging.
No.
I'm just saying, like, okay, and so I'll have to sometimes actually just do it right in front of him off the top of my head. I'm like, okay, here's your idea. You could do it this way. And I could give an example. You could do it that way. I see it, oh, wow, I never thought that you could do it where it's a dialogue. It's all these different ways of kind of presenting it. And I love the idea of tension, because I talk about that as well. What art direction really means is sometimes creating the tension in type. And I always give the example of a headline with just the simple words, fuck you. And if the headline says fuck you in a real scrolly, light script font,
totally,
it's a much nicer ad than fuck you in a heavy sans serif, distressed sans serif, where I already felt fuck you before I actually recognized what that was saying. You're redundant now.
Totally.
And it's creating that space to allow, and I love what you said in presentation about a good, I'm paraphrasing, but a good headline or a good piece of copy should make the reader aware that there's a human being on the other side of that.
Right.
And I think that for us as advertising people, we have to realize that there's another person on the other side of our creative genius. I'm putting that in massive air quotes, because you have to be sensitive to the fact that they're experiencing this. So what we're talking about a little bit, I think, is how we craft the experience of these things. And it's fundamental stuff, but really, really important.
It is. And I think it also, I think it's hard when you're a student, just because you really also, the way to learn is just by doing. So I'm a big believer, I'm running an agency, but it's like, I wasn't some senior, creative director, like at a high level at all these agencies.
That's, by the way, I just think that's so cool that you were ACD or whatever.
Like in training.
No, but like you never had that umbilical cord cut from the work. Your hand was on the work.
Right. And I had to, in the early days, it was hard to learn to be a creative director, but I like, I just think the best way anyone is going to learn is just by doing it. And, so, one day I just called myself a creative director and then had to actually go and creative direct things. And then I did that and I kept doing that. And I kept doing that. And I kept, and you get better and you get better and you get better. But, I think that when it comes to students, I think you said it really well. Like, they think the execution is the idea. Mm-hmm. That's the thing that popped into their head. And so they try to get it down on paper. And they're not necessarily yet able to kind of see the architecture and the platforms and the strings holding that execution up. And so, but as you continue to have lots and lots of ideas, you start to see how the threads connect. Mm-hmm. And then you start to, and also when you see lots and lots of work, I didn't talk about this right. in the forum, I mentioned it, but I do think one of the early things that helped me a lot, and this is when I was right out of school, like junior, I had an advertising blog. Mm-hmm. And it was called Advertising for Peanuts. And it was just me, this like nobody junior working at an agency people hadn't really heard of. And all I did is every day I looked for about an hour on all of the ad blogs and everything I could find and found the one thing that I thought was really great, and I wrote a little paragraph about it and I posted it. Cool. I did that every day for 3 or 4 years. Wow. And at the end, I eventually had like an audience of like 2,000 a day. Wow. And, it was like I'd get referenced by the ad rants and the. It's a cool feeling. I kind of, but of course, I was trying to hide the fact that I was this nobody. Like putting out my thoughts on why this work was good, but it did force me every day to like really, think about why is this good? Think about what is this idea doing? And then I consumed so many ideas, like, and you then just start to really learn, you see the threads. And so I could quickly say like, hey, this execution from, France is kind of like this other one that I posted a little while ago. Oh, and look at this print out. Like once you really both make a lot of things and consume a lot of ideas, you start to see the connections and can then start to like understand how to architect your own ideas much better.
I think you kind of did mention that a little bit, and I do try to emphasize that I expect students to comment on other people's work for every single presentation, because the only way you can be objective about your own work is to learn the language of objectivity looking at other people's work. But back to the other thing about like thinking that the idea is the execution. One of my favorite things to tell students is don't decide what to do, decide what to keep. So do a dozen of them. Don't only do the things you think will work.
Right. Yeah.
You're shaking your head like no shit. I'm telling you. I'm telling you.
Sorry.
9 students out of 9 will execute the one that they think is the right one to do.
Yeah. Well, I even was today talking to it's like you can write 100 headlines and try them all, like in this one print ad that we're looking at. But even deeper than that, I mean, I think I
think they misunderstand what the hard part of this is. I think that a young creative misunderstands what the hard part is. They think the hard part is coming up with this great idea. I'm not saying that's easy.
Right.
But the hard part then is when the manual labor starts and you've got to figure out iterations of that. I think they're equal, but I think that that's a part that's overlooked.
I think bringing a good idea to life is the hardest part, and making it.
There's a lot of ways to fuck it up.
Oh, it's only gonna get fucked up. Right. I mean, I tell my team all the time, it's hard to make stuff because you run into all these problems. Like it sounds kind of underwhelming, but I repeat it all the time when we run into a new, the packaging printing didn't come back how we thought it would, or this. It is hard to get an idea out into the universe.
Do you like a lot of your work, or do you look back at it critically, or is it a combination, or am I spoon feeding the answer?
No, so it's interesting. I don't know, to be honest, how most creative directors. I've only worked with a handful, and a lot of them were very good at Crispin Porter McGusky. But I'm the type of creative director who actually, it's probably often frustrating to work with me, but I assume that I don't know the answer. If I know the answer, it can't be that innovative. If I can just and not to say that there's not something to be said for low hanging fruit, but if I can just reach up like that and kind of know what it is, everyone else is going to reach up and grab that same thing.
Low hanging fruit requires inventiveness of a different kind. You've got to take that thing and twist it.
I think that's right. You have to.
You shouldn't stay away from it.
Yeah, you have to realize it's there for the taking
for everyone,
and that's the thing that's why everyone's maybe left it. Right, they've left that fruit sitting there, right? Yeah. And so no one had the guts to take it. I actually look at Save the Bros like that. It's a PSA. There's been 1 million PSAs that have been done.
Can I share that? I'm going to share. Okay, so listeners, by the time this is up, it will have been shared on the Facebook page. If you hadn't seen it, I saw it probably organically.
Okay, cool.
Meaning, I think I clicked off of someone's share it for Organic Valley. What's the product called?
Organic Fuel.
Organic Fuel, yeah. It's a protein shake, and it's a Save the Bros campaign. It's really, really well done.
But that's, I would say, like, the ad people, in me would maybe be like, oh, like this kind of thing, this execution, has been done. But if you do it in a new way, like what's a modern take on that, you can totally make it something that jumps out at people and is new again.
The Humanaut work all has a shareability to it, in that it all the work feels like it's in on its own joke. So the viewer doesn't feel pandered to, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word. They don't feel like they're being talked down to or fooled in any way. Yeah. The brand isn't coming out saying, try this. The brand is coming out saying, making jokes about itself, right, while it's also selling something. Right. And you're like, yes, that's the point, isn't it? That's what we do.
Well, I mean, it's cool to hear you say it that way.
Yeah. So to me, I think that we have I remember, because I'm a little bit older than you are, son, I remember thinking, holy crap, 30 and 60 seconds is gone, right? Holy crap, we can do 2-minute, 37-second videos. That is awesome. So now we can be so good. Oh crap, now we have to be so good.
Right.
So how liberating is it, but how challenging is it? And I think that I love another thing that you said, which is don't make the stuff that you think is what it's supposed to be. Right. Make the thing that you would make if you didn't have any rules, because there really kind of aren't a lot of rules.
Right.
Kinda.
Yeah. I mean, especially with online. I mean, you can, I think when there's a media buy and it says you got to make a 30-second spot, that's what we bought, yeah, you're a little, but even within that, and I think that's what's hard for me when it comes to like TV. I kind of have in the past said or joked that I never want to make another TV spot, because to me, it's like, it can't go anywhere. Right? It's a 30-second thing that happens. I've made a lot of 30-second spots. There's millions of 30-second spots out there. We've kind of made them all, I think. Mm-hmm. Right? And so if I'm looking to innovate, I'm looking for a new world to create that world can also grow and be shared. I can't share a 30-second spot with you that I saw at a bar that I really liked. Right. Now I could go YouTube it and go find it, but who's ever going to do that? Right. Unless there's a button sitting there that says share this. So I kind of want to I want to interrupt you, and then I want you to then grant me permission to come in. Mm-hmm. Deeper, and then I want you to at the end have such a good experience that you're gonna tell your friends about it.
Yeah. There's another thing that you said that I thought was extremely important for young people to hear, and that is, I don't remember the word you used, but the idea is that you got to look at your own stuff and really, really, really be honest with it. I think that's what you said.
Yeah.
Call bullshit on your bullshit.
Yeah.
So looking at it, would you really like this? And it's so, in fairness, I sit in an introduction to teams class, which is a second quarter teams class. These are people who've been in advertising. The art directors have never taken an ad class. The writers took maybe strategy or headline. So they've been in advertising for 2.5 months.
Right.
And they like that they came up with anything.
Right.
So it's really hard to develop that sort of sense that crap, to realize how much you suck and then still be inspired to not suck.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah. Well, there's two sides to that, right? I mean, so what we do...
I don't mean they suck. My students don't suck, but you know what I'm saying. I hope the listeners know what I'm saying.
And I told them today they sucked, right?
Yeah.
I said, you guys aren't good.
Enough yet.
Right.
They have to know that that's what you mean. I know that they know that.
And I want to make sure the listeners... You will be, but just know that you're...
Because legitimately one or two of you actually shouldn't be doing this in my classes. So the ones that suck... Yeah, they're not good enough yet. I just want to make sure.
Yeah, totally. Okay. Well, but then that's what my point is, that I think there's two sides of this. One is it is a craft, right? It's like putting together a message in a way that's communicative and tasteful, and has a personality and a tone. Like, all of that takes a lot of time to do. And so what you do when you're starting out, I think, is you go, oh, well, this is the format to make an ad. This is how ads are made. And so you kind of like, sloppily then just put it all in that way. And it's like, well, the headliney thing is up here and the imagey thing's here, and then I have to say a taggy line thingy here. Yep. Right. So I think that's kind of how it starts out. It's like, let's make some print ads that look like print ads. Let's make some billboards, and yeah, you're probably gonna have to do some of that. I think, though, I wish people would at the same time simultaneously go, well, here's the kind of the bad ad thing that I'm trying to get good at, and then here's just like a weird thing that I think would be cool, and it is bizarre and maybe makes no sense to you guys, but if I saw that, I'd click that link.
Well, that's your answer to Dan Asnier's excellent question in forum. He was the one who asked the question about, like, you guys are doing this great entertaining stuff, but what about all of us who go to a big agency and have to do banner ads?
Yeah.
Do it, and then also present something that you would actually be excited to make.
Totally.
Right.
I mean, I think we said it in there, how there's opportunities to innovate. The coolest innovations are the ones where people least expect it.
Yeah, and limitation by definition will force you to be more creative. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about one of your slides that I thought was pretty cool. You said develop your sensitivity, develop your empathy, curiosity, and your collaboration muscles. Mm-hmm. Did you think that you had to develop empathy and sensitivity? Were you curious enough as a younger creative to be empathetic, or is that something that you learned along your path so far? And talk a little bit about the development of empathy.
Yeah. I mean, this is tough because we're just, we're getting into just what it is to be a human, right? And in all of your relationships and your marriage and your, friendships.
It's hard. Empathy's hard.
Yeah. And so I the reason I have that in there really is because I think my own creativity is an ego-driven business, right? Or a profession, and especially in the early days, you're just so wanting for your thing to win. You're so wanting for your sensibility to be the thing that's funny. Yeah. You're running it's kind of like, I think at its worst, like, advertising is people's pathway to fame because they, aren't musicians or whatever. And so they're just like in this idea, like I think they look at flashy big spots and big campaigns and big creative directors and they think they've got to act a certain way or have a certain persona or they're going to be a badass or they're going to be just so creative, like and I think that mentality actually is going to make you less collaborative, less likely to keep pushing further, because if you think your ideas are crap, you're going to keep working on them. If you think your ideas are awesome, you're going to go home and have a beer.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's wanting to make sure that you're willing to realize that if you think you're the shit, you're going to turn out to be shit, and also you're going to be really frustrated because it's not going to be as awesome as you think it is.
Very good point.
And I mean, it's a great thing we get to do, but you're going to make your first 30-second spot and be like, I thought, and you're going to see it at a bar. And you're going to be like, I thought it would feel cooler than that.
Yeah.
Like no matter how I've done stuff that's way beyond what I even thought I'd get to do. And after I did it, it's like, yeah, I did that. That was cool.
Right.
It's not like it doesn't change
Right.
and so people who are looking for that in this industry and who are like fighting for that and pushing for that are just going to be disappointed. And then everyone's going to just think they're a dick.
Right.
So I think it's just like, you know, and I think it's been said a million times, like learn to love the process. But I think what that's getting at is like, you know, learn to love, you know, working with people and having ideas and developing those ideas, letting those ideas die, and then continuing to solve problems every day. And then it's all going to work out.
Yeah.
Right? You're going to do great.
Right.
If you just focus on that and not, you know, well, how much salary am I going to get? And did I get credited on this? And I'm going to fight and send emails to get, like, you know, there's just all this drama that happens for nothing in this business around creativity. And
it's really interesting.
And so I just think it means what you care about is advertising and yourself and your resume. Mm-hmm. And if you're wanting to actually do the kind of work that you're super inspired by, that's not how it got done.
Right.
It was some people who, you know, had a unique insight and an artful, you know, way of bringing an idea to life that had never been done because they really loved the developing.
That's interesting you're saying that, because now that I'm thinking about all my former students, the more arrogant they are, the less I hear about them after they get out of here. Seems like the most successful ones were like the ones that would ask you how your day was going and you actually care about the answer.
There you go.
It's really interesting, though. Because
every day they're sitting down, they're supposed to be solving problems for customers on the other end who are going to buy something. And if what you care about is how do I make the funniest thing, how do I sneak in the, like, you know, craziest script, or how do I get away with this for my book, for me, you've just failed at, like... I think you should have some of that, though, shouldn't you? Shouldn't you be a little selfish? I mean, is that bad to say? Because one of the pieces of advice I gave to Dan Asnier when he asked the question is like, do what you're asked with it, and then frame it as if there's something you can get out of this. Like that you could actually present something that could go in your book or something. Sure. Because I guess that comes knowing him as a good human being, and that he's not going to... That's not his personality. What you're talking about is people who are trying to use the system to gain something. Yeah, I guess I'm just saying that, like, you're talking about arrogance. Of course, at the end of the day, we all, if we put in this good work, we should be rewarded in some way, right? And I'm definitely not saying, hey, go work, you know, at an agency that just works on nonprofit stuff and never gets any recognition, and just put your head down and you know, you'll change the world and no one will know your name. I just don't like conflating self-interest, which I think can have a benefit, with collaboration. I think they can coexist to a certain extent. I think that we can care about doing something better because we should do something better and want something better, and with the ability to actually share and empathize and sympathize. I don't know. That's just me. I just think I find... All right, this is why I'm explaining this, frankly, because I have younger students who are waiting for approval, and they're not thinking of it as hard work that benefits themselves. They're trying to do it for external validation. So they're like, well, what's the deliverable? How many am I supposed to do? Rather than actually just like doing it for the love of it, or doing it because they realize that the more they do, the more they'll have. Oh, yeah. That's selfish, but a productive selfish. If I was, I mean... That makes sense. If I was in ad school right now, like, I would be trying to show 30 things every time. Why? Why would you do that? Well, not necessarily show them, but I'd have made them. Why though? Because that's how much it takes. That's how I'm going to win. I'm going to solve this in so many different ways. So this is what I'm talking about. This is a healthy self-focus. You're going to win because you're going to beat the crap out of the blank page. Yeah. The blank page. Yeah. But also because like I want to be the best. Well, I want to figure it out. You want to solve it. Yeah. It's like I want to actually figure it out. That's great. And so to, you know, I'm going to be asking what stones have I left unturned? Like, that's what keeps me. Like, the reason that I am happy, you asked me a question about do I like the work? I really do, because I've made every possible edit of those videos that you've seen. I drive editors crazy. I make every joke that could be, and then and I make a bunch that didn't work. Then I go back and I put all the jokes together in like 10 different ways. And then
You enjoy this process, this part of it?
It's obsessive.
That's great.
Because and then I look for jokes. Half Pops is a great example of so many of the jokes were not scripted. So many came out of the post and the edit that I could never have written.
Very often that happens.
Right? So
keep the cameras rolling, keep the audio rolling.
Well, and also just keep, like, there's a joke at every turn. There's a place for a little idea inside your big idea everywhere you go. And so, it's like, if you're, when I talk about if you're curious about what's still out there, you're going to go hunting for it naturally. No one has to ask you. Like, your teacher doesn't have to give you, like, you're like staying up at night and trying to figure it out just because you want to. I think that's, I'll be honest, if you don't have that feeling at all, like in school or when you're doing this work, like, you probably should just go get a 9-to-5 and then like do creative stuff on the side.
Yeah.
Cause like you're not going to, it's not going to be fun.
No, I think you have to be working and then look at the clock and think that there's something wrong with the clock.
There you go. It's
where you
a
want
state
to
of
be.
flow. You want
like, wait, what the fuck? It's 3:30 in the morning. I've been doing this for 6 hours. That's where you need to be. You don't have the goal. The goal is elusive because there's 10,000 solutions for every problem.
Yeah, I mean, the question people should be asking is like how much time do I have to figure this out?
Right.
Not how many things do I need to show.
I can't stop. Don't get me started. That's the name of the show. So, how do you define collaboration and what makes an ideal collaboration? Because I think that's a word that is said a lot that can be interpreted different ways.
I guess all I mean, at least when I use it in that talk, when I talked about collaboration muscle, I guess it's like, it's as simple as conversation, right? So there's people who, when you're talking to them, you can tell that they're waiting for you to finish talking so they can say their thing.
Sorry, I might have done that once.
I
know exactly what you mean. They're not actually with you.
You're not having a conversation.
They're not on the same side of the table with you.
And I think the same is true of concepting with someone, right? If you're really working with someone, this is a person with a whole nother well of experience and insights and thoughts, and you should realize that like that's valuable to you, and you should listen, and then take some of the stuff that's inside their brain and then let it bounce around in your brain and see what new comes out. I think it's so often for students to just be like, oh, they're not very smart, or oh, they're not, they don't get it. So I'm just gonna like keep saying my ideas. I'm gonna ask them to help me bring my ideas to life. I'm gonna, because I'm the best, and and it's my sensibility, my taste. This is and so it's like, just see what happens if you spend a whole concepting session just asking your partner questions and then being impacted and have your thoughts influenced by their response.
I've thought a lot about this recently, and I've found students lately being slightly less collaborative than they used to be 10 years ago, 5-10 years ago. And I have a theory about it now. And the theory is that I think these are students who have gone to school and college doing group projects. In a group project with 6 people, it's like, okay, you handle like the intro and the video part. You handle the second section. You get all the images, and then we'll get back together and we'll put it all together. That is in no definition of the word collaborative. That's not collaboration in any way. And what you're talking about is true collaboration, of realizing that we're in this together and that you may offer me something. Did you notice, and I'm not bragging or saying I'm great because I'm fucked up as hell. Did you notice a couple times me writing while you're talking?
Yeah.
So I'm writing while you're talking. You know why I'm writing while you're talking?
Tell me.
Because I know what I wanted to say something. I know for sure
you'll forget
by jumping on your train for a couple seconds and being there with you. I'm going to forget it. Yeah. So I don't want to. I want both of those things badly. So rather than interjecting my thought or ignoring you, I'm going to go back to it. And sometimes I don't, because we went somewhere way more interesting. way more interesting than what I thought I had to say in that moment. And I think that's something that people need to practice doing. And hopefully you're not offended that I grab a pen while you're talking, because I'm trying to do that.
I assumed you were just writing everything I was saying down, like just verbatim.
Oh, did you realize we're recording?
Oh. Well, it's different formats.
I also want to apologize to the listeners if you might have just heard that white noise. The air conditioning cycles on and off in this room, and we're picking that up. So a couple more questions, and then we're good. This is.
Yeah.
Did you want to add to the collaboration thought?
I was just gonna say. Oh well, I guess yeah. So the only thing I'll say about collaboration is just like, you want to think about, and we talked a little bit about this, but it's just like there's not one idea. So as you're working with people, you should be coming up with just all sorts of things and laughing at weird things and enjoying the bad ideas. To be honest, one of my favorite things is I love bad ideas. They're very funny to me because they're like they're constructs, and then the bad idea, sometimes we say it out loud and it's like, wait a minute, that is actually kind of hilarious.
Right. If we just tweak one angle of it.
Yeah, and so it's just like, I think, you should be in the process of just
filling the back of the truck as much crap
writing so many things down, and just being willing to keep going back to the drawing board even after you feel like you've done it 3 times, right? Because then you've got your material, you've got your working material, and now you get to the work of starting to develop the 3 to 5 to 7 things that seem to have the most promise. And and I'll say too, there's no way of knowing if an idea is good until you start to put some meat around it.
It's mining. It's filling it up, all this dirt to look for diamonds, and then washing them, cleaning them, see if there's anything in there, and then you have to cut them and polish them and make really interesting. That the first thing should just be, I believe strongly, quantity leads to quality. Just the most you can do.
Yeah.
Keep turning the page.
Well, yeah, just keep digging, and then you've got all your raw materials, and then now, and then of course the process then starts all over again of like, now let's take all this raw material and make a bunch of stuff with it.
Right.
And then once we made a bunch of stuff, let's choose our 3 or 5 sculptures or things, and now let's polish.
It's left, right, left. I made this up. It's left brain, strategy. Mm-hmm. Right brain, coming up with ideas. Yeah. Just pure creative, churning. Right brain once again is developing those into cool executions, and then the left brain finally is kerning, picking the right perfect piece of language, polishing, editing, everything perfect. And all 4 of those are really, 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 really important. I think people in school tend to skip the second right brain, the development of the creative expression of the idea. Right. So they have a great idea, and then they kind of go straight to, we're done.
Do you guys teach process here?
I'm trying to right now.
Yeah.
As we speak. Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
We'd have production class, and we do talk about it in the teams classes. Yeah.
Cool.
So I see now why Andy and Josh Shelton were excited for me to talk to you. It's been an inspiring conversation.
Oh.
And
I see why you actually officiated Andy and Liza's wedding. It's a pretty important role.
You talked about how young people suck, and you'd listen to some old episodes, and I was like, I wasn't as good at this back then. I don't think. I think that even the act of making a podcast, having conversations, is something that you only really learn what's working after doing it for fucking 10 years.
Yeah. That's how you get good.
You said, be great, be honest, and care more than anyone else. I don't know anyone who cares more than Andy Pearson. Care more than anyone else is something that, it's funny you said that. You're giving students advice to care more than anyone else. And then a few minutes ago you said, if you don't, then you should take a 9-to-5 job. I think that care more than anyone else for the students who aren't succeeding is just going to explain to those students why they're not succeeding, because the other person cares more than you do.
Right.
And you can't care about something because someone tells you need to care about it. You have to ask yourself the question, do you actually care about it?
Yeah.
Is that a fair thing?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and there's a lot of, this isn't just crazy. I mean, there's a lot of, things that back this up. And I think even Malcolm Gladwell talks about this, is he'll say you have to love it more than anyone else.
Right.
It's like, I think he uses the example of like Wayne Gretzky loved hockey so much that he obsessed over it enough to think about how he could maybe score a goal from behind the net if he could bounce it off someone, right? Like it's that no one else is doing that, you know, and so you do, and you know, I think the tricky thing is like, well, what's the advice for people who don't have that? And I guess it's just like, how do you develop your curiosity, or how do you find the thing about this, whether it's the school or this industry or whatever, that does get you excited?
Right, and be honest with what excites you. And then Susan Cradle had a great quote. I think it was Susan Cradle on one of the walls here that says, if you're in the diamond business and you find emerald, get into emerald business.
Yeah. Well, there's so what's great about, and here's the other thing I'll tell anyone who's listening. It's like this, you're learning what you need to do. And what's great about everyone here in the school is like they've committed to this, right? They've chosen a path and now they're on it. And that is the most important thing, is just choosing the path. Then the great thing is like you can get really good at this and you can get off the path later too and go, you're not going to waste your time if you spend 5 years, you know, working your ass off in this industry and then choose to go do something else. You'll be an incredibly, you know, valuable, you know, person in going into a different industry or going client side. You know, one thing that I think is going to happen more is creatives are going to get frustrated. You know, some of us do love, and I'm one of them, working on lots of different things. Yeah. But that can also feel like I'm not making that big of an impact.
That's really interesting.
But if I go client side, what if you went and worked at Patagonia in 5 years? Or, you know, or wherever, Harry's or Tom's or some brand that you just like. So many brands are going in-house, you know, they're bringing a lot of their creative in-house. So you can also just decide, I want to go work for this company and be creative, you know, be a designer or be a writer. Yeah. And then the other thing is, I think, I was always really entrepreneurial and kind of that's continued to be my track of being an inventor or trying to make things. I think this industry really teaches you how to think about business, to think about brand, to think about customers, think about how many businesses, and I know you've talked about this before, but how many businesses we've gotten to know and industries and how we can speak about them and we know how they work. And not only that, we've gotten to do it on like 20, 30, 50 clients over, you know? Yeah. And you'd probably be really good at starting a business if you started one right now, right? Like, because you know how brands work, you know how to be, you know, how to be cool, how to talk to customers, what customers are looking for. You're already in that space. So, I mean, I hope that down the road that advertising, you know, whether it's selfishly for me or for the kids doing this, but like it's a pathway to entrepreneurship and starting your own thing. Absolutely. Or starting your own agency, or just learning. Like if you get good at learning how to make things, you're gonna go make things, and then that thing could be a company, or it could be an app that takes off, or that becomes, or it's a widget, or you know that sells to some other company. You know, so I just think that like there's so many awesome pathways that come from starting here, and you can't go wrong if you've got onto this path, putting your head down and learning how to get really excited about your future that this path is taking you on.
You have the right to do any of that stuff. That's the thing. It's right. You have permission. Exactly. Thank you so much for the conversation. Very, very fun. Listeners, thanks for sticking around for the hour. This has been a long one. It's been really... This is a perfect example. I did not realize how long we were talking.
Cut it down.
Is it David at, or your full name at?
David.
David at humanaut.is. You can find the work at humanaut.is. Make sure to like the Facebook page. It's facebook.com/DGMS podcast. There will be links on there. I'll make it really easy for you. I'll just put stuff right on there for you on the Facebook page. If you can send me an email if you want to talk about anything. Did I piss you off? Did I piss you off when I yelled at whoever opened the door? I'm not going to throw them under the bus. I really, really want to say that person's name right now. You can reach me at Dan's Podcast.
I think it helped.
At mac.com. What'd you say?
I think it helped.
It helped? It woke me up a little bit?
Yeah, it got us.
Yeah, fuck that shit. There's a fucking sign on the fucking door. Listeners, we'll see you again in 2 weeks. David, thanks again, man.
Yeah, thank you.
It's great meeting you. Listeners, we'll see you. Bye.